Hello, folks. Welcome back. This is Chris in Central Pennsylvania. During his State of the Nation address for 2026 on the 12th of February, President Ramaphosa announced that the South African National Defense Force will be deployed to support the police in combating gang violence in the Western Cape and also in Gauteng, after identifying the Western Cape as a priority area, marking a significant escalation in the state's response to organized crime. Or so it appears. Now, he can do that. It's permissible under the Constitution. The legal basis for such deployment is Section 201 of the Constitution, which permits the President, as Commander-in-Chief, to authorize the employment of the Defense Force in cooperation with the police service. Now, that is an important distinction, in cooperation with the police service, not in lieu of the police service. Keep that in mind. Now, the framework reflects a constitutional balance. The South African National Defense Force may assist in maintaining law and order, but policing remains the mandate of SAPS, in other words, arrest and detention. Now, previous internal deployments in South Africa have included operations to support the police service, including the 2021 insurrection in July that happened as a consequence of the ANC's internal failings, as well as using military to go against Zama-Zama's illegal mining. Soldiers provide perimeter control, coordinated search operations, and logistical support, while arrests and investigations remain the sole responsibility of the police service. So, the government's new focus on crime, is it real? Is it going to solve anything? Deploying the military, is that a solution? I submit to you folks that this is simply applying plasters in the vernacular South African English, or bandages on gaping wounds in American English. Ramaphosa announced the recruitment of 5,500 additional police officers this year, in addition to the 20,000 they previously committed to increase. But we have no indication that those 20,000 ever showed up in the ranks. It was just a commitment. And besides, when we find corruption at the highest levels of police as a consequence of the Mhlanga Commission, what's the point of recruiting new police when they're being led and trained by criminals? Also, the government is seeking tighter firearm controls. Why? Disarming law-abiding citizens is not a solution. It's a recipe for disaster when people can't defend themselves, particularly when the police are unresponsive or they're corrupt. You see, criminals will get guns, regardless of what the law says. Also, they want to focus on the illicit economy disruption program using data analytics and artificial intelligence. Seriously, this is a government that can't deliver flush toilets to schools. This is a government that can't repair potholes. And it's going to rely on data analytics and artificial intelligence? What, outsourcing it to Google? And besides, it's a bit late. Construction mafia, taxi mafia, Toitsi everywhere. Illicit cigarettes, Zama-Zamas. It never ends. It's a gangster state. Now, in the lead up to the Democratic Alliance's conference where it will select a new party leader, many are positing Jordan Hill Lewis, the mayor of Cape Town, as the leading candidate to replace John Steenhuisen. But his response to Ramaphosa's announcement at the State of the Nation address leaves an objective observer shaking their head. Cape Town Mayor Jordan Hill Lewis welcomed the announcement, but cautioned against viewing military deployment as a structural solution. I welcome that news because the SAPs are overwhelmed and communities need urgent help. A few weeks or even months of deployment will be a temporary fix. We must also have additional investigation powers from Metro Police so that we actually get criminals off the streets and into prison. That's a real long-term solution. But while that may be accurate, it's only part of the solution. Mayor Lewis needs to also look at the fact that the criminal justice system is broke. People who murder others get out in a few years. Most people who commit crimes are never prosecuted, let alone convicted. That must be addressed as well, not simply equipping the police. Now, Western Cape Premier Alan Winde also welcomed the decision. Speaking to Business Day after the State of the Nation address, he said, in January alone, there were 345 people killed. He added that he welcomed the deployment of the SANDF because of the additional resources needed to address gang violence in the Western Cape. But folks, I have to tell you, I'm gobsmacked at how easily South Africans place their trust and confidence in a race-oriented, under-resourced, underfunded, neglected, and dilapidated military that can't even feed itself. A force that must send its troops into combat with no uniforms, no body armor, no tents, no boots, and no medevac. That's what they did to the troops they sent to the Congo recently. Also, how easily we forget. A country that has long viewed the deployment of the military onto civil streets as an affront to human rights. Certainly that was the argument during the apartheid era. The use of the military in the townships was one of the major reasons why the world turned against South Africa. Yet today, South Africans, black, white, and brown, think that the military is a solution to crime, that they can solve this problem. But have we forgot all about Talon Bezuidenhout, who was murdered by Sandef in Alexandria during the COVID scam? Have we forgotten about that? The abusive behavior of the Sandef, not trained for the mission of civil deployment. And of course, when they were in KZN. Now, when the government seeks to control speech, turning words into felony convictions, albeit that's if you're a white minority, otherwise you don't get convicted for the most part. And at the same time, these officials place their confidence in a rogue military that sets foreign policy by going to Iran and allying themselves, contrary to government policy, and invites and participates with terror-designated organizations, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, and abandons its troops in the Congo, and then jumps the queue at ShopRite and Pick and Pay for the few places that weren't torched during the ANC internal insurrection in July 2021. This is the military that these officials think is appropriate to engage in law enforcement or support of law enforcement. I have to tell you, I'm shaking my head. The very same people who would scream about the deployment of the military in 1985 in Soweto are the same people, the same mindset today that are calling for the use of the military to fight crime. Shouldn't be the mission of the military. In Botswana they do it, but it's effective there because that's a professional force that's funded and resourced. We can't say the same thing about the South African National Defense Force. Not even a shadow of its once proud SADF. The SANDF has become an utter joke. Incapable of self-deployment, incapable of feeding its troops in the field, incapable of giving them uniforms. But they are capable of depositing them into conflict zones and leaving them to their own devices. Now, this is not a condemnation of the South African National Defense Force. It's a condemnation of Parliament, which doesn't fund the SANDF, and also of the President and the Minister of Defense, Angie Motshekga, in not court-martialing a general who's off the reservation. What's really happening? The Lady R, the visit to Iran, the IRCG participating in naval exercise. Who's running the military? And is that military capable of reinforcing the police in the Cape Flats? I wouldn't hold my breath. More Talon Bezuidenhout murders are likely to occur for an ill-disciplined force that's put on the ground. What say you, South Africa? Cheers.